Welcome to this week's episode of Eye on the Tigers. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andy Hewling. And this weekend, Auburn sports will see a fairly balanced slate of home and away matches. So it's looking like it's going to be another packed weekend on the Plains for the first time in a while. Let's get into it. First up, possibly the marquee matchup of the weekend, is Auburn football's A-Day. Andy, what are you expecting to see out of this team tomorrow in their first public scrimmage?
It'll be really interesting to see how they come out, how they perform, and some of the changes that will take place on offense and defense. I mean, obviously, I don't think we're going to see like a whole lot. I mean, I think it will definitely be different. There's going to be different play calling, different formations. I think you're going to see a lot more of the run game, I believe. From what I've seen of practice, seems like Auburn's going to be running the football a lot more, more hard-nosed offense than we're used to seeing in previous offenses where they're more wide open and throwing the football and trying to be more explosive. So I think that could be one change to expect. But obviously, there could be a lot more that we'll see from them.
Yeah, you mentioned the offense and the run game especially. I'm excited to see the new foundation that offensive coordinator Bobo has built, and I know that Tank Bigsby's excited for it, Shaun Shivers. And Carson overall, based off the scrimmages and practices in earlier weeks, he's been excited with the offense's progress and just even their progress last weekend in the scrimmage that was originally supposed to be open to students and faculty, but because of the weather got moved to the indoor practice facility. But on top of that, defense I think is going to be really excited to look out for just because they once again lost some talented players looking to rebuild. And I think it'll be hard to gauge the team's progress based off scrimmaging themselves, but I think it'll be fun to get the public involved in the community of Auburn, and I think that's definitely something to look forward to, and I think that morale is something that the team can continue to build on as spring and summer workouts continue. Next up, we have soccer. Auburn soccer will play Virginia Tech at a neutral site this weekend, and it's their last game before they hope to make it to the NCAA tournament. Andy, what will be key in this matchup if the Tigers want to prove that they're on the other side of being a bubble team?
Well, they have to win this. I think it would be really impressive to get another win over an ACC opponent. Obviously, they fell to Clemson, who was ranked pretty high. But I think Auburn has shown over the course of these two campaigns in the fall and the spring that they are worthy of making the tournament as maybe a lower seed. But I think you can't leave them out especially if they win this game, because they're going to have a good record, a winning record, and really not too many losses to show for it. So I think Auburn needs to go out and prove to the NCAA tournament officials that they deserve to be in there, and I think they'll go and do that. They're going to play hard, and hopefully they keep the win streak going, and then are able to get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, they do currently have a 4-game win streak, which they're going to look to continue. But this team has been really fun to watch this season during the second half and the spring, these non-conference matchups. On all aspects, this team has improved, and they've progressed immensely since the beginning of fall. Defense started high, still getting better, offense especially, but I think the key in this weekend's matchup is going to be the midfield, because as long as they can control the game and control the ball, I think that the Tigers are going to really look to shoot goals and make them on the mark, especially because Virginia Tech is also a very offensive-minded team. And these are both bubble teams, both looking to prove that they deserve a spot in the NCAA tournament. And ACC is possibly one of the best soccer conferences in the country, so it's going to be really stiff competition. But if the Tigers can just keep a good head on their shoulders and focus on offense and controlling the ball and possession, I think they have a really good chance of making it to the tournament with a win. Next up, we have the second home event for the Auburn Tigers this weekend. Softball will host Kentucky, and this comes after the softball team had a really busy week. Last weekend, they won the series against Texas A&M, and then they also had 2 midweek matchups against Georgia State and Alabama State, both of which they won. Andy, this is a tough Kentucky Wildcat team that they're going to be hosting this weekend. What did you see in their games earlier this week that will be key if they want to win another SEC series?
Well, I think they're starting to get confident on offense finally, and it took them some time to really get the bats going. But I think against Texas A&M, they were able to get some crucial hits that ended up giving them a series win. I thought Alyssa Rivera was part of that. She had some she had 2 good games in game 1 and game 3. She had multiple RBI games, and I think really with that, if they can keep staying confident, staying hot, a game against Kentucky, like you said, it will be tough, but I think it's a winnable series for them. And what they showed just going into A&M getting a top 25 win and then backing that up with a pretty good win against Georgia State, a 4-1 victory where Maddie Penna had a good performance and really showed what she's all about. And I think really just coming into this series, they should be confident, they should be hot and ready to go.
Yeah, you mentioned confidence, and I definitely think confidence will be key for the Tigers this weekend, especially after such a long week. They need to build upon the momentum that they've already established, and they just need to focus on their mental toughness. But like you said, the bats were really rolling earlier in the week, and they got a lot of contact, but if they want to continue winning, just contact is not going to be enough. They're really going to have to focus on power and hitting them out and far. And you mentioned Alyssa Rivera, Justice Perry. These players, they've really begun to find their stride again. And in terms of the pitching staff, we've talked about it before. They're very impressive. Maddie Pinta, Shelby Lowe, KK Dismukes, just to name a few. And I think that this Tiger team has a really good chance of continuing their momentum. But like you said, it's all going to come back to confidence and just the mental aspect of the game. Our last Auburn sport of the weekend is baseball. The Tigers traveled to Tuscaloosa yesterday to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. They lost last night in the first game of the series, and this is just another bout in a tough SEC run for the Tigers. They got swept by Mississippi State last weekend, and they did have a midweek win against number 20 Georgia Tech, so that win over a ranked team was hopefully going to build their momentum and confidence, but they lost in another close one last night by 1 run to the Tide. Andy, what do the Tigers need to change if they want to win this series and get the next 2 wins?
I'll tell you 2 things. One is pitching. It can't be stressed enough how Auburn's pitching is starting to kill them in close games. You have Cody Greenhill and Richard Fitz, who are your 2 aces, and last night was another example of how Cody Greenhill's a good pitcher, but he can't make it deep into a game. So you got to put in a guy like Richard Fitz in a tough situation who really should be a Saturday or in this case a Friday starter, and you put him in to try to save the team, and that doesn't work because he's going to a lot of pitches, and then you got to put in another reliever, and then that's where Auburn's bullpen starts to kind of go downhill. And it's nothing against them, it's just they don't have a lot of experience, and that's to me where Auburn is lacking is they don't have guys who can go deep into ball games, especially starters who can last 7 or 8 innings max and give them what they need as far as the depth in the bullpen over a weekend series. So I think that's one of the biggest keys, and it happened again where a reliever came in and gave up 2 runs in the last 2 innings to end up costing Auburn game 1. And then I'll say another thing is I think Auburn, just the game management with being up a run or down a run, just in these close games, it's just coming back to bite them. And usually Auburn has been up in some games against Arkansas. They were up 5-0, and then they ended up squandering the lead twice in that series. And then Alabama, they're up 7-6, and they give up a home run and then give up a walk-off single for the win. And I think just controlling the game, especially being ahead, not giving up the lead, that just comes back to pitching and it comes back to defense. And I think they're just making some errors and some mistakes that are just really costly. And I think their record doesn't really prove how good of a team they are. And I think really it doesn't show the kind of quality that this team actually has in depth, and really just is not at all like what this team really should be as far as a record and anything like that. I think this team is a lot better than this, and I know Coach Thompson knows that. He knows that they're going to eventually come back and be, and start winning games, but when's that going to start? It needs to start now.
Right. You mentioned the potential that this team has, and they have so much potential. They started this season really hot. Obviously, there's a huge difference between non-conference play and SEC play, but you mentioned Coach Thompson knowing this and needing to get them back on the right track in terms of momentum, and all it takes is a win. And clearly they won this midweek game against Georgia Tech, and they lost last night. But this team, they have so much more to prove. You mentioned the bullpen struggles. That's obviously highlighted a lot of this season thus far. But one thing that I would love to see out of the Tigers is just getting back to their hard-hitting ways that they began with in the beginning of non-conference play. Like I said, this competition is definitely not the same as it was in the beginning of the season, but at the beginning, we kept reiterating the fact that hitting is contagious, and game after game, multiple home runs, multiple big hits, RBIs, and this team, they need to get back to that, and I think that that will also help with the team's momentum overall. And I don't know if that's going to take switching up the lineup, the batting order, but they need to do something to try to get back to that spot, because there's nothing that's going to hype up a team more than scoring those big runs, especially getting a home run. I mean, one thing that stood out for me from this past series against Mississippi State was when one of their players hit a home run into the bullpen, and the bullpen just went insane. And obviously, that brought the energy for Mississippi State. And Auburn can easily have that. They just need to get back to the hard hitting that they had earlier in the season. And on top of that, some fielding errors have definitely plagued this season. And so just playing smart, like you said, game management, I think that they know what they need to do. They just need to act on it and then play that way consistently, because this team, they do have so much potential. And going into this, they weren't ranked very high in the SEC or nationally at all, but everybody here in Auburn knew the talent they had, coaches especially, the players themselves. They just need to build their confidence back up, and especially if they can get 2 wins out of the remainder of the series against Bama, I think that that'll set the tone for the rest of the season. So obviously a lot rides on the remaining 2 games tonight and tomorrow, but the Tigers have a lot to prove, and hopefully they'll make that statement. That's all we have for you this week. Be sure to tune into our website at eagleeyeauburn.com or our Twitter at EETV_sports for more news and sports updates. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andy Hewling. Have a great weekend, and War Eagle!